Hey everybody, Regina Bryan here, and welcome to the Women of Empowered Living. And boy, oh boy, do I have an extraordinary woman to introduce you to today. Despite having her leg amputated at age 5, my guest today was the first African American ever to win medals at a Winter Olympic competition. She took home a silver and 2 bronze medals at the 1984 Winter Paralympic Games in Innsbruck, Austria. Oh, it's such a thrill and a privilege. Everybody, welcome Bonnie St. John. Hey, Bonnie, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. It is such a crazy story. And I grew up in San Diego and my family had no money. So, it's hard to ski on one leg, but it's really hard to ski with no money.
You are so right about that. And where are you joining us from today? Where in the world do you happen to live?
I live near a ski area, it turns out. I used to live in New York City and have a cabin up in the woods, but like 5 years ago, I decided to move into my cabin and I fly all around, do it normally. But now that we're all not flying, it looks pretty smart to be on 5 acres with a well and a generator.
It must be so beautiful there.
Oh my gosh, it is so peaceful. And I can sit on my porch and look out at the woods and the mountains and I can't even see another house. I mean, I live on a street with other houses, but the deck view is just the forest.
Incredibly awesome. Now, Bonnie, I first heard of you because in 2017, you were the winner of the John C. Maxwell Transformational Leadership Award, and you were at our August IMC event, and then you stuck around, thankfully. You did a few calls with us on the power of resilience, which is a topic that you know well, and you're going to speak with us today about it. And you spoke a second time at the 2018 August live John Maxwell event. So some of us here are familiar with you today, and we have a lot of things to cover about resilience. First though, Bonnie, when you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, you shared something with me that just a couple of things actually that really stuck with me. Tell us about that first time. You're an Olympic athlete for skiing. Tell us about that first ski trip of yours and your friend Barbara.
It was awful. And that's so important that people think, oh, well, you were always good at it, or you're just a natural, especially kids nowadays, because social media tries to make it look everything easy. But my first time skiing was awful. I was invited by my friend Barbara Warmath to go skiing. And I actually don't tell many people this, but because I was worried about being a burden to my friend Barbara, I found this group of amputees and tried to go skiing with them first before I went with Barbara's family over Christmas vacation. And we were supposed to go to Southern California. The tickets can sell out because it's so, near LA, it's a national forest. They limit the number of tickets. Anyway, the tickets sold out. We couldn't get tickets to ski, so we had to go night skiing. So my very first time skiing was in blue jeans and a sweater and a windbreaker because I was from San Diego. I didn't have winter clothes. I didn't know what it was like. I had knit mittens. So my hands would get wet and frozen in the snow. And this is night skiing. It was awful. And I was bruised and falling down. I'm on one leg, I couldn't even snowplow. I kept falling and falling. It was awful. But Barbara had invited me to go with her family. So even though that was so bad, I was motivated. I got to stick with it. I got to, do this with Barb. So I went to Salvation Army and found a pair of ski pants. I went to Kmart and got a jacket and I got some waterproof, so I was like, okay, I could do better.
The big shopping spree, Bonnie.
Yeah, Kmart. Yeah, that was all I could afford. But then I went with Barbara and her family up to Northern California. And she stuck with me on the bunny hill for 5 days. She could have skied anywhere on the mountain, but she stuck with me and helped me. I kept falling and falling. It was on one leg when you can't snowplow. It's like doing deep knee bends for hours in the snow. I wasn't even going anywhere and I was exhausted. But what happened was after 3 days or so, I started to be able to move forward and pick up speed. And even though I ran into men, women, and children, when I finally learned how to turn right and turn left enough that I could hockey stop, then I was perfect parallel skiing and my tips never crossed. So then by the end of the week with Barbara, I could go on intermediate slopes and I was perfect parallel skiing. My tips never crossed. People were going, who was that amputee? So it was horrible to start off with, but because she helped me to stick with it and she really encouraged me, that I was able to, by the end of the week, say, wow, I can do this. And maybe I could even start to race. So she blessed me so much.
And that story blessed me, Bonnie. And that's why I wanted us to start there, because I was kind of convicted. I think if I look back and I think about the moments where maybe I didn't invite someone to do something because they might be uncomfortable or I might be uncomfortable, your story really serves a wonderful reminder to all of us that something Paul always says is, don't say no for other people.
Oh, that's a great one.
Never know.
I ran into her mother years later in Utah, and she apologized to me. She said, I'm sorry, and I was like, what? You took me skiing with your family. It changed my life. She said, I know, but it was so awful. You were bruised, you were bleeding. I said, Bonnie, swimming's a really good sport. She said, I tried to discourage you from ever skiing again. But I don't even remember hearing that, because Barbara encouraged me so much, and I was able to do it. It's amazing because Barbara's white, I'm Black. She lived on the rich side of town in La Jolla in San Diego. I was from National City, which is where the industry is and the Navy base and the high murder rates and everything. And I was bused across town to her school, to her neighborhood, to go to school. And actually, I started out in private school with her. I was on scholarship. My mom got us a scholarship to go across town. And we were in altar guild together because it was an Episcopal school. And so we were both serving in the altar guild at the chapel services and things. And so I think it's a God thing. And she is a profound woman of faith. She has served in the Peace Corps. She, her whole family now, she has kids. They went and lived and worked in a refugee resettlement Christian camp to help people. I just get chills when I say that, to help people coming to America to get skills and learn English and be able to be productive. She just has such a Christian heart. And, when I asked her, when I told her kids, like, your mom changed my life, she just says, well, that, I don't understand. It's just, I just wanted to go skiing with my friend. She just has such a heart. And so when I look at everything I've been able to accomplish in skiing, it's like, it is such a God thing. It had to be, right? What a crazy.
And then you think about, and we don't want to go down that track. I couldn't help but think, what would have happened had Barbara done what so many of us do, which is already say no for you, already establish your limitations, Bonnie. And this whole story would not have been written, but it was a God thing because it was so meant to be what you've gone on to achieve at the Olympics and beyond. And your life
I just want to underscore what you're saying, though, too, because that lesson is so important, is that in the workplace, and I work with coaching a lot of women in the workplace about advancing in their careers. And, we've seen decades of people saying, oh, well, you don't want that promotion. You're going to have kids, or your husband needs to move, or, is we make decisions for people about what they can and can't do. Or I know a guy in a wheelchair who was with a company that did investments, and his peer said, oh, it's winter, you're in a wheelchair, you can't go interview that CEO for due diligence in Minnesota. And he's like, yes, I can. So yeah, not making decisions for people, or deciding, whether you're Black or you're Hispanic or a woman or in a wheelchair, we need to see people's power, not their limits.
That is so powerful. And I don't think there's a day that's passed, Bonnie, in the couple of weeks or so since we've spoken, that I have not thought of that story. And I've told it so many times.
Barbara saw my power and then helped me realize it. I'm going to cry. And I love that this is a women's show, and it's about women helping women too. And she's
really got me.
Yeah.
Because what you're sharing with us, and what I'm thinking is, do I want to see people's power, or do I want to see their limitations?
Do I want to see God in them?
Do I want to see God in them? Ooh, that's so good, Bonnie, because I think the easy answer for most of us is just to dismiss and to assume what can't happen for ourselves and for others.
We think we're being kind. Often it's done out of kindness too. It's funny, we have a word for racism and sexism, but there isn't a word really for ableism. So often when people are limiting people with disabilities, they think they're being kind. But we wouldn't, it's like we've learned more in other areas, but in that area, still people can be thinking they're being kind by putting low expectations on people with disabilities.
And that story just hits home because all of us in this community, and so many of us are John Maxwell team members, we are taught to see the bigger, greater vision in our lives and the lives of others. And yet, I would have been Barbara's mother in that story. I would have been Barbara's mother.
And
I
thinking you're
wanted
being
to protect you and not see you hurt.
Right. You're trying to protect. And
And
we
by
do it to our
doing
kids
so,
too. We do it to our kids, and we need to, that's a hard one.
that is a hard one. That is a hard one. And I think because of your life story and your experiences, you've had so much hardship to overcome that your life really is a study in resilience. And that's a topic you know well and speak about often. So talk to us just how do you define resilience and how can we use this?
Well, it's interesting, and I wrote a whole book on resilience, micro resilience, and the typical resilience research, like if you Google resilience research, you're going to get a lot of research about people being down and out and trying to get back to normal. So if you're mathematical, it's like the zero axis is, can I get back to the zero? But my interest in resilience and what I've written about and what I talk about is about high performance resilience, much, not trying to get back to normal or zero, but to be way above that, and that you still need resilience. It's not just about being down and out. It's about being at the top of your game. So like if you imagine a sponge, you squeeze a sponge, you let it go, it goes back to its original shape. No, when we get squeezed, we should get better. And I think, oh, you know what? You and I were talking about the Silversmith Parable, right?
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
Yeah, and it's Malachi 3:3. And it's just this one phrase that this woman saw, he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. And I just get chills when you think about that. And so she was curious about that. And she went to visit a silversmith to go, well, it says in the Bible, God will sit with me like a refiner of silver. So what does it mean? So she didn't tell the silversmith what she was doing, but she went to watch and she was asking questions. And he said, well, you have to hold the silver in the hottest part of the fire to get out all the impurities. And he said, you have to watch it close because you don't want to damage it, but you got to get it right to that point. And she said, well, how do you know? And this whole metaphor of God is like a purifier of a woman, holding her in the fire until all the purities are out. But this actual silversmith, she said, how do you know when to take it out? And he said, when I can see myself in the silver. Oh, that just gives me chills.
Gosh, that's almost too much to process, Bonnie, especially as you talk to us about resilience and looking
so we can
back.
get stronger. And so the point was, resilience isn't just about getting back to normal. It is getting us closer to God. And right now, the world is going through so much upheaval, and we're all distracted. And I'm exhausted. I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm just sailing through it. It's hard, right?
It's been a tough year. It's been a really tough year. And as I look back on this year for myself and others, everything that you're telling us is something so powerful. How do we use this idea of resilience and micro resilience, especially, Bonnie, as we push through? We're regular people. Most of us are not super athletes. We're just trying to get to the next year. We're trying to do a little bit better and weather this pandemic and all the things that 2020 has brought us.
Well, we coined the term micro resilience to talk about really tiny things that you can do that make a big difference. And so macro resilience, what we think of as macro resilience, is, get enough sleep, eat right, exercise, all the things you have to do, good habits. And that's great. But there are also tiny things you can do that have an immediate effect. It's not about a habit you do over time. It's something you do today and it has an immediate effect today. So in the book, Micro Resilience, we have like 20 different hacks that are based on research for neuroscience and positive psychology. And, they're evidence-based things that really work. But one simple example that everybody can use tomorrow and take away from this is the idea of a first aid kit for your attitude.
Isn't that
a great idea?
I love that. Talk to us about that.
Kids can even do it. I've done it as an after school activity for fourth graders, and they get a first aid kit. You got Band-Aids, you got ointments and things, and you don't know when you're going to need it, but you're ready in case you get an owie. Well, the same thing, you can have a first aid kit for your attitude. You know, you're going to have days when your attitude is bad and your attitude stinks. And
Right.
somebody said, did you have a bad day, or did you just have a bad half hour that you let ruin the rest of your day? So applying first aid to your attitude, you can turn it around and get back on a better track quicker, right? So, when you think about it, what do you put in your first aid kit? You can put songs that lift you up, and there are songs that make you sad, right? So you could have a playlist of songs that lift you up. You could have quotes, you can have Bible verses, you can have photos. One of the tips that my husband gives, though, too, he was my co-author on the book, is he says, don't just put all your first aid kit stuff on your desk, because you stop seeing it, or if it's in a really public place, you stop seeing it. So like, have a first aid kit that's in a drawer, or in a bag, or in your phone even, that you just take out when you need it, so you can apply the first aid, so it still has an effect. It hasn't worn
That's
off.
That's so powerful, because you're right. If everything I need is on my desk, when I'm out in the world, or when I'm really needing something, it's not on my phone or not in my purse. So you're saying, as a strategy, take these things with us.
Well, and you could do both. You could have it
Okay.
in a drawer in your desk, but you could also have it in your phone. You can have several different places. I mean, you in your office, you could have one first aid kit, and in your home, a Band-Aid first aid kit, you put it in more than one place, because you got to have it in an emergency, right?
That's
Anyway,
right.
I know we have other things you want to talk about too. I did a whole TED talk on this idea of resilience and a first aid kit. And one thing I've been saying to people too is, if you want to do this with your team at work or your family at home, you can all watch that TED talk, that it'll give everybody an understanding. And then you can talk about, what goes in your first aid kit. One of the things in mine is a note from my mother that says, cherish yourself. And my mother passed away over 10 years ago, but she struggled. She went to segregated schools in Florida when she was little. She used to have to walk past the white school, the big, beautiful white school, for more than a mile to go to the rundown Black school with no textbooks. And she went on and got her PhD and became an educator and made a difference for so many people. So when she says cherish yourself, that's not an easy thing that she could do. And it wasn't easy for me either. And anyway, so
And
that,
she, as you're talking about your mom and the things she went through, she was also alive to see you win at the Olympics. Before we go back to the first aid kit, I'm thinking about your mom. What was that like for her to see her Black daughter, 1984, take home Olympic medals?
oh my gosh, she was so proud. Actually, it's really funny because she's an educator and she didn't really get it about sports. So at first, when I started skiing and racing, and I took time off from Harvard University and to be a ski bum, in some glacier somewhere waiting tables, I think she was a little worried. But by the time we got to Innsbruck, Austria, with 500 athletes and all the flags and all the hoopla, she was so excited. I mean, she's the kind of person that would have seen a jogger going down the street and said, can't they do something constructive with their energy? Like, she didn't get it about sports. But so here she is in Innsbruck, Austria, and after the first run of the slalom race, I was in first place in the whole world. She got so excited. She was like, jogging, I don't understand, but winning, oh, I like this. My brother actually rolled her in the snow to cool her off, but she was so proud.
That's a significant moment for your mom, having gone to segregated schools to watch her daughter win at the Olympics. Bonnie,
Wait, I'm sorry. You just reminded me of something. I just got to say this too. And I think
please.
it's important that people hear this, because it's so easy for us to think, oh, there's no real problems with racial things in America. But I got the chance to take my mom to Rockefeller Plaza and go ice skating in New York when my daughter was about 8 or 10, I think. And we I had been doing something with the Olympic Committee, and I knew somebody at Rockefeller Plaza, and they brought us in like VIPs and cut the line and got us the skates. And she was a beautiful ice skater, my mom too. And so she's ice skating with my daughter, and it's all wonderful, and the Christmas lights and everything. But the kicker is, and I'm going to cry, I didn't find this out until after this whole thing happened. She told me when she was little, she grew up in New York City, one of the girls at her school had a birthday party where everybody was going to go skating at Rockefeller Plaza. And she was friends with this girl, and she invited everybody else, but not my mother. And it came out later, it was because they didn't want Black people skating at Rockefeller Plaza. So when she went with the VIP treatment, don't you just get chills to get to be brought in there as a hero and say, you are going skating and you're a VIP here and you're an honored guest?
Gosh, I'm just thinking so much about your mom right now. To see these things happen, you win Olympic gold, Olympic silver and bronze, to see you go to Harvard. And if those things aren't good enough, what really might stick with me now, hearing this story, is that she got to go skating in Rockefeller
As a VIP, as a
as a
VIP. And
VIP.
and it's, it's like the story of Jason and the multicolored coat, right? Is that he was brought in as a slave and rose up to be honored at the seat at the table, right? And our people were brought in as slaves in this country, but to be able to grow and contribute and be leaders, and that God does that.
Oh my gosh, Bonnie. And so we took this whole path to your mom just based on you sharing the note that your mom wrote. So, and again, give us that. It said, cherish yourself.
It just said cherish yourself, but she had that beautiful handwriting. In schools they used to teach penmanship.
Right.
Now all you do is typing, right? But she had that beautiful. I could just see her handwriting, and it just takes me right back to how much she struggled and overcame, and gave me that spirit of being an overcomer.
Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. What else is in your first aid kit?
Oh my gosh, chocolate. Break open in case of emergency.
Every woman has chocolate in her first aid kit.
I gotta think so. I got, and this is an interesting idea too, is when you do this as a team or you do this as a family, you can give each other things to put in your first aid kit. And I got a gift once from some people I work with. It's a ceramic cup, and they put in little pieces of paper. They're almost like fortune cookie inserts. And each one of them has something written on it that's inspiring, or something they love about me, or a piece of encouragement or something like that. And so that does sit on my desk, but you can draw one out when you want to get a little bit of positivity.
That's
So
an excellent idea.
there's so many great ways to do this as a team or as a family. And then it's stickier. Like if it's just up to you, there's some days I'm so off that I'm not going to think, oh, first aid kit. It's like it's helpful to have a community around you that is doing some of these micro resilience ideas, so that it's there right at the moment. That's the idea of micro. It has to be there in the moment.
Ah, that's good. And I love the idea that you're talking to us about doing it as a team or doing it as a family, as a group of friends, because community is so important to all of us.
I have another story like that. And this is
Oh,
perfect for
please.
women, because we're talking about women encouraging women. Although I know there's some men who are listening into, and it's great.
Very smart men are watching the show.
So, but there was a woman who lived in one town for a long time, and then she moved. She got a job somewhere else, and her husband moved. So before she was leaving, her girlfriends got together, and instead of just giving her a gift, they gave 3 envelopes to her husband. And they said to him, give these to her on a day that she's struggling. So, and it's the same concept of first aid, right? So instead of just giving her a gift, say goodbye, they gave these little nuggets of love, and they were just simple things like a pair of earrings and a nice note or a scarf or something like that. But on a day when she's struggling, her husband could apply first aid and just give it to her when she needed it. And that is the power of micro resilience, is being able to do something in the moment.
Oh, that's so good. This idea of micro resilience and of community, you've given us some great ideas with our first aid kit. What else can we do if we're starting from scratch and we have either kids at home or the folks that we work with, whether virtually or we see occasionally at the office? Where can we start with encouraging other people and encouraging them to come along with us in this idea of first aid kit and resilience? How do
The first aid kit is
start?
a great one. And we said, you can share the TED Talk if that's a way to get sort of the vocabulary going.
That's a great way.
It gives some foundation a little bit for micro resilience as well. So it can be a great start to the whole conversation. Right now, it's interesting with the pandemic and the social justice movement and things that are going on. We're often getting knocked into fight or flight mode, right?
Mm.
We're undergoing change and uncertainty. We don't know what to expect. People are working from home. Their children are going to school from home. And elderly folks were worried about their health. There's just a lot to be panicked about, or just unsettled about. What happens, the science of that in your brain is that your fight or flight gets triggered. It's called an amygdala hijack. And I live in the country, like I said, and so if a deer jumps in front of my car, the amygdala makes me react immediately, and I swerve, or I hit the brakes, and before I even go deer, I'm reacting. That's a perfect use of an amygdala hijack. But when it's happening at work or in your family, or things that you need to deal with using intelligence and maturity and all subtlety, then an amygdala hijack really is like an undertow in the water. It sucks you down. And one of the biggest evidence that you've had an amygdala hijack when you didn't want to is people say, that just wasn't me. Why did I do that?
Yes.
And the amygdala is trying to help you. Like with the deer, it shuts down all your thinking. So just react. Don't think, just react. But in other situations, the don't think is actually really bad, right? And the other thing is, it's exhausting to be hijacked like that, right? So one of the hacks that we teach is to start recognizing when this is happening in the moment. It could be in a meeting when you say an idea, and 10 minutes later somebody else says the idea, and everybody says, great, let's do Bob's idea. You're like, hey, what happened? What am I? So we can get hijacked by all kinds of little things. Even they say, when somebody says to you, I have some feedback for you at work, they said your brain reacts in the same way. They can measure the blood flow in your brain, and they said your brain reacts in the same way as if you were in a dark alley and heard footsteps behind you. So it's things like that are happening at work or in your family, where we're having that fight or flight reaction, where we want to attack somebody or run, or even just shutting it down and bottling it all up. It takes a toll on us. So recognize that. Oh, so the hack, so I should tell you what the fix is really, really simple. There's research out of UCLA. Matt Lieberman says if you just put words on it, if you put labels on what you're feeling, it helps to de-escalate that process. And you don't have to do it out loud. You don't have to do it out loud. So if people are in a meeting, like, what am I going to do? You can write it down, if you were in a Zoom, or just say it to yourself. And what it does is it puts you back into your higher brain, your prefrontal cortex. So you're using words. We say to little kids, use your words.
Yes.
Is by getting out of that anxiety and the fear, and you're being swept away with this emotion that's not productive in that moment. If you put words on it, then you are standing here and you're saying, oh, I can see that emotion. And then it puts you in your advanced brain, as opposed to getting swept away in your primitive brain. And then you have choices. You can say, oh,
so Bonnie, is it like a separator? Like I'm seeing this about myself. I don't have to be it. I can put it over here.
Right. And you can change your mind. You can say, I'm angry, or I feel helpless, or I feel betrayed, but then you can make a choice and say, okay, but what I want to do is feel compassionate or forgiving, right? And you can make that choice. But by simply putting a word on it, it gives you power. It puts you back in your power. And then you can, oh gosh, we're going to say the word. You put the word on it, and it puts you back in your power to be able to make choices to be forgiving or compassionate, or God, to be your God self and not be your primitive self. You can read the research on this. This is so funny, because we're saying it's such a God thing, right? But there is research where they look at scans of your brain and show you that you can change the way things are going in your brain by simply putting a word on it.
Woo. That is so powerful, because in this season of life, for a lot of us, we can use all of those tips and strategies that we can get. If there's anything else, Bonnie, before we talk about an empowered life, and there's something about those Olympic medals around your neck that I want to ask you about too. Okay, since you're holding them up, off what we've talked about in the last few moments, what did that moment feel like? When they're putting the medals around your neck, what does that feel like, standing on that podium representing this country?
You know what? I have to tell you, this is another one of those stories that I don't tell, but you're gonna get me to tell the story I don't tell. Is I have 2 bronze medals and a silver medal from the international games. I have a lot of medals from national championships, but that's different. I have 3 medals from international games. The 2 bronze medals, they put around my neck. My mother cried, the whole thing. The silver medal, which was the overall, so it was the highest medal I got, and it was overall performance. It was the final ceremony of the games. It was a big deal. All the big wigs were there. I missed it. I wasn't there. Somebody else had to stand on the podium for me and get the medal around their neck. I wasn't there. It was, my sister was skiing, and she's not a very good skier, and she got stuck up on the mountain and she couldn't get down. Now, I think my brother was there too. I could have said, oh, my brother will, he'll help you get down, or we could have called ski patrol, whatever. But I was so bullheaded, I stayed with her and helped her get down the mountain. Now, and I don't think that's like, oh, I'm such a great hero. I think that was my own difficulty in being celebrated, that I was willing to miss that award ceremony. And people told me later too, I was the first African-American to win medals in Winter Olympics. And at this big publicized ceremony, a white girl took my medal. And I let people down. And I didn't see it that way. I didn't understand. And this has been a theme for me too, because sometimes we are being humble, but it's not serving God. And we think that our humility is so good, but it's actually egotism, because you're more focused on yourself and not on what other people need or what God needs you to do to serve. And a story I told about that was when speaking, I used to, now I'm on big stages all the time and everything, but like one time I was speaking at the VFW in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and it's a small room, whatever, or I'd be speaking at a school, in a school library or something. And what I learned to do is like pull out a chair and stand on the chair, because then I could see everybody. I'm 5'2". If I'm not speaking on a stage, you can't see me. I disappear. And so I learned to stand on a chair so that I could see everybody and they could see me, and I would be a much more effective speaker. But I don't like standing on the chair. It feels arrogant. It feels pushy. It feels like I'm foisting myself up. But I had to say to myself, if you're letting God speak through you, would you put a damper on God? Would you smush God? And so and this is a good thing for women too, right? Because this is a core
such a good thing.
Because we often have this humility that we think is so good, but we're not serving. Sometimes the humility gets in the way of you serving. And if you say, hey, if I am serving God, if I am sharing God's light, would I put that under a bushel? And so sometimes we need to put ourselves up, even if it's not comfortable. And it has never been comfortable for me. And I get on stages, I was uncomfortable at my own wedding because people kept staring at me.
Stop it.
No, I don't like to be stared at. And then maybe that comes from being a disabled kid and everybody stared at me. I don't like being stared at. I do not like being the center of attention. And then here I am, a motivational speaker.
So Bonnie, okay, that moment at the Olympic Games when a white girl took your place because you were on the mountain with your sister, are you saying that there's a part of you, large or small, that just didn't want to be celebrated?
Yes, I was always uncomfortable with medal ceremonies. And at the time, I didn't see what I was doing, but looking back, I see that was avoiding the limelight. I liked being excellent, but I did not like winning. I didn't like being the center of attention.
You didn't like the recognition.
Part of it. And also, if you think about this, I was a disabled kid. So I was always different. I was picked on for being different. And so as you get better and better, it's like you're getting this affirmation, you're feeling good about yourself and not being the crippled kid. But once you're the winner, then you're singled out again. You're not like everybody else. You're trying to fit in. I was trying to fit in. I was always trying to fit in. And when you win, you don't fit in. You're not like everybody else. And it was
mind blowing what you just shared. I never would have guessed that. I never would have thought that's where you were going when I asked you about the
I know ceremony. I was supposed to say it felt great. I loved getting all the attention. I'm the best. Love, but you know what? This story I'm telling is a many women's story, right? Is that we're not comfortable with being the best. We're not comfortable with being celebrated. And then we try to make that into a virtue. And sometimes it is, we don't need to be an egomaniac, but sometimes it is not a virtue. Sometimes
That's
we
right.
are covering God's light.
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. And I know I could talk to you all day, Bonnie, and I want
I
to.
know, but
And
we
I
gotta
know you're on
go.
a schedule. So before we lose you, we've talked about so much, and we could talk for another half hour or so. We love to ask all of our guests this around here. What does it living an empowered life mean to you? What do you want to leave us with this empowered life?
Well, this conversation has been so profound. And I told you, we're talking about things that I don't talk about in a lot of other places,
I love that.
and corporate places. And I love speaking in corporate places, and I love bringing the light there. But you can't talk explicitly about some of these things anyway. So I love that we could go deep on some of these issues, particularly that impact women. That we need to be strong. We want to be strong. We have God in us, but how do we own that and get comfortable with the power of God in us? And I think that's a real journey for women. So I love that you're doing empowered living, and I love that you are ministering to all these women. And thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you for being part of it. And one day, Bonnie, you and I are going to talk, because your whole not showing up for the medal ceremony, I can relate in terms of this show, kind of. And so that's going to be a story for another day. Bonnie, you are warm, you are wonderful, and full of wisdom. I am
Keep,
better.
let, keep letting your light shine. Keep standing on the chair. You're doing great. And this is what God has for you in this season.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. You have blessed us today. Thank you for joining me, Bonnie. And thanks everybody for watching. I mean, this is a true story of resilience and overcoming. So Bonnie, thanks for your time today. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.